how we think about product today is going to be flipped completely in a few years. There's a lot of chatbots that are summarizing things for you, but is that really what the end user experience of AI should do? There's going to be a shift, and a lot of product managers are probably going to be shocked by that.
What do you feel like is the most overhyped aspect of AI and product management right now?
I think that we'll all be out of jobs as product managers. We're not making up here, right? So the focus on understanding your users, their pain points, how your product can make their lives easier is still key to what we do. If everyone's just pumping the same product strategy through AI, how are you really going to start producing those competitive, creative product strategies that differentiates one company from the other? AI still lacks that creativity or the out-of-the-box thinking that you would need sometimes as a company, as a product manager.
If you're going to use AI, you have to go and make the final draft your own. It feels like AI lacks taste, and that's something that whether you're a PM or you're a designer or an engineer, you should kind of rely on is how do you bring taste to this?
It's funny that as product managers, product folks, we love to complicate things, but our job is to build simple things. If your customers are happy, you're growing, your product is successful, you have the product market fit, you're getting that 2x, 3x, 10x growth over time, cool, that works for you. If someone finds value in what you're doing in the business, that's perfect. Keep rolling. Think about the targets. Go think about that Ferrari. But can you give me a Corolla for today to solve the problem with it? And how do we get to a Ferrari? Nintendo had a statistic last year that 80% of features are probably rarely used. The whole part of being a product manager or product designer, or just being part of a product team, is that creativity and solving things in a novel way. You want your engineering managers to be involved in the solution. You want them to be involved in the product. They're the ones who are on the hook at the end of the day. They're the ones coding. Some folks love to challenge the status quo. I call them the disturbers.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Product Growth Podcast. I'm really excited about today's episode with Sam Kawsarani. Sam, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Big fan. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, really appreciate that. So as a quick background for those who may not know, Sam is currently the VP of Product at Paramount Commerce, where he leads a team of 10. He's been in product since 2012. He was the head of product at IOU Financial, co-founder at Coral, and senior director of PM at Intersect, as well as VP of product at Railz. So he has a long, diverse career in product, and this gives him quite a bit to say about the craft of product management, which is what we'll be talking about today. I've really enjoyed his content on Substack and LinkedIn, so I can't wait to go deep. Let's start with today's hot topic, which is navigating product management in the era of AI. What do you feel like is the most overhyped aspect of AI and product management right now?
I think that we'll all be out of a job soon as product managers. That's been a question that every PM has asked, at least in every event that I've attended. So in my opinion, there's a lot of hype around AI's ability to fully automate the decision-making process in product management itself. And I don't want to deny that AI cannot make valuable insights and recommendations, which is true. But I don't think it can replace the human judgment entirely, at least for now. So that's kind of where I see the overhype. Now, I understand that AI kind of keeps getting better over time, and this statement might be wrong maybe in a few months, or ask me again at the end of the year. But the way I see it today is at least effective product managers still requires that human oversight to interpret the AI, give it the context, learn about your business, and make those nuanced decisions that humans and PMs in general still need from a empathetic perspective or just knowledge about your business. And that's kind of where I see the hype is going at this point.
Today's episode is brought to you by June, the customer analytics for product-focused teams. Are you not sure what users do in your SaaS? What features they use the most? Do you wish that you could know what each company does and use this information to generate incremental lift in revenue? June is the product analytics platform you need. It generates profiles for each of your customers that get you closer to your most important ones. It also connects your product data to your CRM so you can get a full view of your customers in one place, so you can engage with the right message at the right time. What makes June different is that it's made for B2B SaaS. It comes with account-level analyses, fast ways to look up your customers, and CRM integrations to share this information between your product, your success, and sales teams. and one line of code is all you need and you're good to go. Sign up for a free trial today at june.so/Akash. That's june.so/AAKASH. You get a discount if you use my link. The future of marketing is word of mouth. Turn your users and partners into your most valuable growth channel with podcast partner Cello. Cello is the only all-in-one solution to engage your most passionate users and partners to refer your product with just a few clicks. Best of all, Cello is directly embedded into your product and handles everything from referral payments to tax and compliance. And it runs on autopilot, so you can focus on scaling and building your own product. Here's how it works. First, within just a few hours, Cello integrates with your product and existing tools to automate all manual work. In your dashboard, you can then set up your referral campaign, define the reward details, and make the referral experience your own. After the program goes live, Cello continuously analyzes and scales its performance based on AI-generated recommendations. Plus, you only pay if you're successful. Go give it a try for free and learn more about user-led growth at cello.so/product growth. Couldn't agree more. It doesn't seem like any of the recent decline in product management can be contributed to AI. Do you feel like any product management jobs have been eliminated due to AI so far?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, there's probably, you'll see more automation of the job of the PM, but also the way and the products are going to evolve in the industry, and the customer needs of products is probably going to just exponentially grow. And our role as PMs is going to grow with it. So instead of probably adding new hires, we're probably going to be leveraging AI just to kind of supplement our day-to-day. I mean, there's been a lot of layoffs in the market, but I don't think AI is attributed to it as much as probably bad business decisions over the past few years.
That's what I see as well. If anything, I personally have seen, advising a lot of job seekers, that AI is helping the job market. A lot of the people who are laid off, who maybe spent 6 to 12 months on the market, where do they end up? At an AI company, or a company that's growing because of AI. So recently, companies like Databricks, OpenAI, Anthropic, Character AI, Google, Microsoft, all the people I've been working with, that's the places they're ending up. So if anything, at least in the short term, I might argue that AI is helping the career.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a upskill needed. I think people panicked when the whole industrial revolution happened years ago, probably a century at this point. I can't keep track of history. But folks thought it's like, oh, people are going to be out of jobs because of machines and everything else. But then what that did instead is it upskilled the workforce and created new jobs and new opportunities. And I think that's completely, totally the trajectory of where we're heading from an AI and industry in general and product management. Does it mean our job is going to change? Absolutely. I don't think yet, at least, it's going to eliminate. And not until we have AGI. Maybe then we can talk about that at that point. But still, I have big hopes.
Yeah, and what even is AGI, right? Because a recent Turing test result showed that ChatGPT outperforms humans. So it's already more human than the average human. So I feel like a lot of these milestones that, you might hear from Sam Altman, who I love, or Dario or Sundar or Satya, it's all in their interest to hype it up. It's going to help them get paid more. But as of now, I feel like there are limited good pockets where people apply AI. So in my newsletter, I've talked a lot about that. And that's where I want to dive in now, is as a VP of product, as someone managing a big product team, how have you been leveraging AI in your day-to-day?
That's interesting. And I think that's a good question that I still have a lot of trial and error of how I use AI. It's not like I found the perfect recipe, and I'm no expert by no means. So I don't want the audience to think I'm the AI guru here. So a lot, what I'm going to share now is probably based on how I try things out. Some of it has been working and some of what hasn't. I probably group it into the use cases at least, into two buckets. So there's the kind of the productivity boosters. And then there's or what I call my personal proofreader for editing and suggesting any product artifacts that I work on. So maybe let's just start with the productivity booster first. One area that I've been kind of excited about and I use on a daily basis, and not necessarily just because of ChatGPT, it's been kind of rolling out the past 2 years, is how can you highlight feedback and pain points mentioned in continuous interviews or recorded customer calls, whether it's Gong, Evoma. Instead of having to listen to a 2-hour sales call, I now have AI capabilities that summarize or pinpoints, oh, there was a pain point here at this minute, or there was a feedback given about the product, or the competition was mentioned. So that kind of becomes a trigger for me to go action on it and listen to that call. I don't rely on the text snippets that are summarized kind of from an AI perspective alone. Just, I feel you still need to listen and watch. AI transcripts are not as good as understanding the human emotion sometimes. And there's the body language and what's being said between the words. So I still rely on it. That's why I say I don't rely on it 100%. It's more of a trigger for me to go, oh, there's a feedback or a pain point at this point. For someone, if you notice probably from my accent, English is not my first language. So for someone who's ESL, and this is selfishly, I rely on Grammarly a lot for my day-to-day just to operate as a product manager, as a leader, or just my day-to-day life in general. So a lot of it where I'm plugging in alternative words, suggestions to the tone, or just maybe something that might resonate better with whoever I'm sending this to. I butcher expressions, especially related to pop culture. So I'm always trying to look for those that understand them to kind of slot them. And Grammarly has been very helpful, especially their AI version. Two other interesting areas that I'm still exploring, and I'm not sure if I'll stick with this. It's kind of the trial and error that I was talking about. So we do case study assignments for a lot of the hiring process where some people like it, some people don't, but I prefer to give an assignment over 3 days, come in, present it as part of a workshop. We whiteboard it together. But what that's been helpful is instead of giving the same case study for every PM candidate is in the initial interviews, there's kind of notes being taken with our screening HR folks by my initial interview. And I take those notes and I use them to create a customized case study just to highlight or test for those kind of question marks or areas and gaps that I had in mind. So kind of it's more tailored for that experience and kind of showcase or highlights more weaknesses that individual has. Another area this is kind of HR admin related work, if we want to talk about it, is weekly one-on-ones. I take a lot of notes, feedback given, things that I'm telling my team. This tool 15.5 we use has this cool thing where it summarizes all the points and notes that I've taken. So when I do my performance reviews, I'm not having to remember 3 or 6 months of feedback that I've given. I have everything slotted. For anyone listening, please do not use AI to generate your performance reviews for your employees. You still need to have a human touch in it and personalize it. But I definitely take advantage of the notes and the summaries. To my team listening down the road, yes, I use AI to remember the things I talked to you about. Now, if we look at product perspective or product artifacts, I kind of liked your video the other day when you talked about how not to use AI for generating your product strategy and how to use your 45-50 minutes. So I'm kind of aligned with that philosophy. I've tried ChatPRD and I'm a big fan of how it can fuel your work as a product manager. Where I see an issue with right now is it misses the business context, where you have to give it a lot of business context. You have to teach it a lot about your business, your use cases, your strategy, your vision, your KPI. Sure, you can probably give it all of that, but I don't think every business appreciates putting that out there, especially if you're a SOC 2 company like us and payments. I cannot just put everything online without our full official AI strategy in-house. Where I do see it handy though is, to your point, I think earlier this week, is create your own drafts first and then use AI or ChatPRD to maybe check for, did I miss anything? Or in my PRD, kind of the checklist, did I cover my kind of go-to-market? What's my launch plan? Is what I wrote covering all of those aspects? And then give it a reread, give it a draft. There's a personalization aspect to it. And if everyone's just pumping the same product strategy through AI, how are you really going to start producing those competitive or creative product strategies that differentiates one company from the other? Otherwise, we're all going to look cookie cutter.
I love it. I love it. And just so everybody knows, the 45-15 framework that I recommend is if you have, let's say, a 60-minute time block to work on your PRD, I recommend 45 minutes you actually develop it yourself. But wouldn't it be awesome to just have an average PM buddy And that's what I feel like Chat PRD is. It's not, your best PM buddy, but it's your average PM buddy. And it'll give you, all the gut checks. Hey, you know what? You actually started writing your impact sizing, but you never completed it. Let me complete it for you. Or it looks like you've overscoped this feature. That's actually feedback it's given me a couple times on things I've done. So it can help kind of as the average PM. So that's really cool. It sounds like you're using it even for your high level strategy documents as a VP of product.
Yeah. And again, not to create it as much as to revise it and review it. I think some folks on my team as well, including myself, where we feel there's a soul missing, or maybe we're not catching something when I check the tone. Not everyone is good in finessing content and strategies. They might have the great ideas, but when they put it in writing, it might not be the best format. And I think that's where myself and other folks on the team are taking advantage of it, where you write your draft and then you make it cool, and then you review it again to check how it ties to what you actually need.
Makes sense. Can you share like a very specific time where you used it and kind of like what your experience was, how you reacted to it, maybe even how you prompted it to kind of like get what you wanted?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that was at Paramount. So that was at Railz. And just happened, we're talking like ChatGPT 3 or 3.5 at this point. So probably a year or so ago, maybe less. So I was still at Railz at the time, and just like a lot of tech companies, we went through a layoff process, and I was on pat leave on top of it. So we kind of slashed our team by almost 50% then. But we had a couple of product releases coming up. There was some documentation, we were an API product. So for those who don't know, Railz was a universal financial data API. So a lot of it was documentation, kind of case studies, use cases of how people can use our product to solve, let's say, account receivable solutions, things like that. So we didn't have the manpower to do all of that internally. And this is where AI came in, where we literally fed the user story and the acceptance criteria that we had to generate our initial documentation, or, hey, how can you use these APIs to build an account receivable solution, or how can you integrate expenses to QuickBooks, for example, using our APIs. So we relied a lot on that. The prompt were pretty much basically like, assume you're a product manager, you're working on this Rails product, here's the feature, here's kind of the acceptance criteria, here's a link to the API docs and kind of the swaggers and everything detailed around it. Now prepare a case study for how to launch with Rails, targeting this area, this area, this area. And to a certain extent, I think it did 80% of the job, and especially for folks and PMs that might not be as technical. When working on products like that, it was a heavy lift for us as a team, especially when I was on pat leave. I wasn't kind of fully disconnected. It's very hard to disconnect on pat leave as a parent, in a startup as well on top in the early days. So I was kind of still jumping in a few hours here and there, and it definitely helped me be more productive while also being present for my family at the same time.
That's an incredible story, actually. And I think a lot of people who are stuck on pat leave are going to be inspired a little bit to just speed up those times they need to jump back into work. So we've talked a little bit about how it's changed your workflows already. Now let's put on kind of your future casting hat. I think Shreyas Doshi, he had an amazing tweet, right? He said something like, in the era of GPT-7, when engineers are prompting these things and designers are prompting these things, is the PM job just going to become like being able to prompt these things really well? I thought that was a bit of a mind shaker in terms of how much he was forecasting forward. I don't know if we can forecast that far forward, but I'm curious, like, as you look forward based on the changes it's already had, and we know that the progress is still in the early innings, most likely, and it's going to continue to rapidly improve. How do you see it kind of changing the way PMs work?
It's funny, my wife and I argue that product managers are probably going to become prompt managers in the future with AI, which is kind of a sentiment that is in the market. I think there's a short-term and kind of mid-long-term view on this. The mid-long-term probably still evolves over time as things come in. But if you look at a short to mid-term, I think AI will come in more as agents at our disposal. I think Amy Mitchell did a good writing about this yesterday, about imagining what product management would look like with all these agents. So if you look at our kind of mundane and day-to-day tasks that we do as product managers, I think like there's probably going to be agents at our disposal to facilitate data analysis and kind of doing deeper insights into user behavior, market trends, telling you that this performance metric is actually not going well if you don't have that kind of good product sense when it comes to understanding analytics. Building those facilitated or user experiences or that are tailored for your customers. So now you're kind of able to, if you look at A/B testing, right, in general, it's the process that you have to do the different prototypes and you have to give it to the designers, launch your A/B testing campaign and kind of monitor the data. And if you have agents down the road where as a PM, you're probably starting to think about an idea and the agent will just build a prototype, launch a user testing process for you, gives you the analytics, and then it's up to you to make a decision based on that. So that's kind of the short term or midterm, how I see agents helping us as product manager. Can a product manager do design? Can a product designer do product management? The other area which I see midterm to long term is a major shift in the paradigm of how we think about product management. So if you look at launching a product today, we got to talk to users, we got to talk to customers, do our discoveries, figure out what the use cases are. And building AI in general and in product is a bit different approach from what I'm seeing in the market today, where there's a lot of experimentation and spray and pray to figure out what the use cases are. You cannot go in and say, oh, let me figure out what the use case is for AI yet, because no one knows exactly what the use case. There's a lot of chatbots that are summarizing things for you, but is that really what the end user experience of AI should do? I think there's going to be a shift, and a lot of product managers are probably going to be shocked by that. Like, what do you mean we're building things before you know what the ICP is or what the use case is or who's actually asking for it? And I think that's where it's going to flip product out itself from that mindset perspective. At least that's my view on it.
So in this world of agents, then what I'm hearing is that designers are becoming much more efficient. They might be like using their agents to do a lot of this work, and then they're making the final decisions on design. Engineers are becoming a lot more efficient because these agents might be able to do a lot of their programming for them. So does that mean that actually the skill set of product management becomes more important for those roles, and that potentially the role could get diffuse? Or how do you kind of see that process playing out?
Yes and no. I think for the hard skills, probably you'll see those diffused, and the agents and AI will probably be able to supplement that, right? So if you have a bug in your product, and do you have an agent that can resolve this bug for you instead of allocating work on your engineering team to do it? Or if you want to do design. So those hard skills agents can do. Where I see your skills, even where you have to double down on your skills as a product manager, is more the business sense and the business manager side of it. You now own a business line, your empathy skills, your analytical skills, your strategic thinking, your communication skills. I think that's what's going to be amplified and needed more in your day-to-day that you'll have to rely on. And you'll probably see a shift. Probably folks will self-select themselves out of product if they're not able to work on that skill, because there's a bit of a also character and a personality type to it as well. Not everyone's gonna pick up empathy tomorrow or have that analytical questioning mindset. It just takes time to build. And I think that's where you're gonna see where the role of PM is gonna be emphasis on that, not how well can you write a user story, how well can you write a PRD, as much as like, can you understand the market today versus not.
That sounds like a more of a shift towards kind of the core product strategy that a lot of PMs, they never even get to practice if they're in a feature factory. But that is what we need, I think, to kind of like insulate the role from what these changes are happening, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the strategy side, which not a lot of PMs probably get to do right now, they're definitely going to get to do it over time and soon enough.
So that's kind of the positive vision. Now I want to put on more of our dystopian hat again in the Shreyas world. What are the downsides of this? What could be the potential negative scenarios here?
Just like any technology, there's probably going to be pros and cons. The only thing, for example, one of the main things that concern me about reliance of AI, especially if you look at it from a product management within processes itself and how you do product management, I feel like limited creativity. Right, so AI still lacks that creativity or the out of the box thinking that you would need sometimes as a company, as a product manager. So I feel like as you rely on it more, that creativity is probably gonna die down. And then you kind of build that. Again, it's a personality thing, but you might end up building that lazy culture mindset for PMs. Like, oh, I can do AI for this. And there's a lot of PMs that I coach in my day to day, and it's like, oh, I'm using AI to do this, and I'm using AI to do that. It's like, okay, but what are you trying to solve? Like, cool, you've generated all of this content, but what does it mean to your business? Do you have a good understanding of your users? And I feel as we give more automation, that kind of soul of product management and building products within company might actually end up dying down as well. Not intentionally, it's just part of when you don't practice some certain thing, you're gonna forget about it. Like that muscle kind of starts getting weaker. And the other area is more of, I guess, the ethical side of AI, right? As you integrate more AI into your product, your processes, can you start have bias that starts creeping in? So if you're gonna be adding AI to user testing, to A/B testing, or personalizing your product, is it going to start favoring, unintentionally, of course, one group over the other? And how do you handle that as a product team? And how do you actually plan for that? That's going to be a risk that you have to plan for. So these are things where kind of as a question mark or concern as you integrate AI, add to it data, security, all of that, obviously. And you're seeing more of those discussions happen in Europe and to a certain extent in North America today. How do we regulate AI? How I feel about regulations, that's the topic for a different call probably. But at one point, you're going to see more of that come in to kind of handle those objections.
I want to double click on that first point because I think there could be a lot of practical takeaways for the product leaders listening. What should be sort of the upskilling you do of your product managers or the guidance you give of PMs to effectively work with AI tools so they don't have that creativity gap or that laziness mindset? We definitely don't want the Wall-E world. Everyone has probably seen that, right? Just sitting on our couches and asking the AI to do everything world. So how do you kind of guide the team the right way to leverage these tools the right way?
I believe there's a personality of the PM matters a lot in this, right? So the way we say, does someone has aptitude to learn something versus not, right? There's a lot of skills that as an individual you may or may not have, or it's very hard for you to learn, or just you don't care about it, right? So the personality of the folks on your team is gonna matter a lot of how you influence how they use these tools, whether for good, for bad, or balancing manual work versus automated work. What I do with my team as well is before using something, you got to understand the history of it. So I have this list of curriculum, I guess, of get to know AI, for example, the history and some articles. And none of us are AI experts, and we know it at a very high level business perspective. But like things to know from a historical perspective, how did this originate? What are different AI? How did ChatGPT, kind of the history behind it? And then best use cases for prompt engineering and how to prompt properly. You can just say, hey, generate a user story. There's kind of the role, the ask, the task, the instructions, the feedback, asking it to review itself. There's kind of the chaining. So there's a lot of those kind of skills, which wouldn't be very different from onboarding on a new tool as an org and how to use that tool kind of better to do your job. So I think that mindset is kind of differs, but I definitely will put a lot of emphasis on the individual behind it. I guarantee that some folks on my team probably are taking the lazy way out and we're working through it. And I know folks that I'm coaching that I know just generate their PRDs and user stories and just send it through. And if you're working in a smaller environment, sometimes people might not notice that, especially if you're working as a product manager reporting directly to founders who might not have product experience necessarily. But as you start working with a bigger product team or org, I think those kind of cracks still to start showing when you're not using it properly. Anyway, I digressed here probably, but I think that's where I would double click on with my folks is like how to leverage the tool properly to prompt it, but also what to accept as result versus not to accept as results.
That's what I also focus on. So we've slowly been expanding the team at Product Growth. And I've kind of said, I don't want to see an AI output. I don't want to be editing an AI output. There seems to be if you're going to use AI, you have to go and make the final draft your own. You have to go in there, figure out, oh, the AI just hallucinated here, or the AI is sounding overly robotic here, and edit it. It seems like that's kind of one of the key skills PMs probably need to pick up. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's good to use it to frame. I guess that's a better word, like framing your thoughts. Not everyone is good in framing and organizing the thoughts. I'm one of those folks, right? I use AI to frame sometimes my thought. Like, okay, if I'm going to prepare a strategy doc or anything, it's like, look, you know what? I have these ideas. I know exactly what I got to talk about and what I have to cover and why it was helpful. But I might find it hard to start, especially that I struggle with writing personally, right? So I use it to frame, okay, these are the ideas and here's the order maybe, and then I go in and fill all the details and there's that review. So that's what I'm trying to instill on my team to use that. So I think we're aligned on that one.
All right. And then the second thing you had mentioned was this dystopian world where we have no originality. And I also want to double click into that point because it was kind of striking to me when Claude Sonnet 3.5 released. It had really good agentic capabilities to code. But if you asked it to create, for instance, like a settings page or a login page, you could almost find out there in the world the exact same thing where it had just plagiarized it and put your name on it. It feels like this copycat world is highly likely with these agents. That's just how the nature, it seems, of how these neural networks are working, where they're just plagiarism machines. So what are some practical ways teams can avoid kind of falling into that trap where they're not making original products?
I think like the whole concept of generative AI and the keyword generative might be confusing for a lot of folks because it's not really generating from scratch as much as it's correlating what words work well with what to create the content you need based on your prompts. How do you get creative? I think you got to add your personality and your flavor to it, right? So sure, you can probably prompt your personality in it. Is it really going to understand it in the final results? I doubt, at least not now, right? So you can tell us like, hey, be funny and use these sarcastic examples and use a cool catchy opener. I'll probably do that, but is it really going to be you? I've seen documents where my team kind of talked about pain points, but not necessarily at Paramount, like other folks I coach outside, where it's like, hey, can you review this draft? We have a big meeting, we're kind of building a kind of strategy doc. Can you review it just to see if it's good? And I can see from the openers and what's flowing in the doc that this is not really them because I get to know them on a daily basis. So you can't assume people are stupid, right? Like if I have a good relationship with my direct reports, I know how they speak, how they articulate their thoughts. So that kind of becomes very inherent. Now, how you kind of build that creativity and what differentiates you, I think to your point, you gotta be in the driving seat. You cannot just let AI drive that for you. You gotta start things yourself and just rely on it for the drafts and the final edits. But at the end of the day, the final results need to be at least reviewed by you to see if it's relevant to your business, to your personality, or context. Because if it doesn't sound like you, and you can tell, probably everyone else will. And that kind of boils down all the way to building products, right?
Yeah, I think in 2024, the state of AI, at least as of August, GPT-5 hasn't dropped yet, it feels like AI lacks taste. And that's something that whether you're a PM or you're a designer or an engineer, you should kind of rely on is how do you bring taste to this?
No, exactly. So the thing, there was an article a few months ago about AI for designers. I think you can probably use AI to generate some designs, but it's going to miss that taste, as you said, or the soul of the designer. There's things that I see that my designers do. I was like, oh shit, this is really cool. It really captures what we do as a business. It captures you as a designer. And I don't think AI is going to do that. I mean, I think Figma, when they rolled out their AI thing, they had things that looked like what Apple design, or forgot what was the issue. I think Apple designs was the result of a Figma AI designer. I mean, I don't want to discredit the need and the use of AI and tools like that. I mean, you can probably build component guides and web components and style guides based on your final designs to kind of make that mundane admin work easier. But I think that's where you kind of hit the nail on the head. Taste and personality is not going to be available through AI anytime soon, at least from what I've seen.
If taste is so important, It's interesting that we are starting to see on the fringes some role merge examples. I recently documented those in a newsletter post yesterday about growth product design, where we're seeing, like, for instance, there's this title out there at this company that's really successful in Amsterdam called Framer, called activation lead. So you might expect like an activation lead to be a PM. I think historically people might have thought that. But then you look at the job description, the requirements, they're looking for a product designer. But the product designer is really going to lead all the growth experimentation and measuring results. And you're seeing more and more on Twitter, the design engineer. So it's not just design PM, it's also design engineering. Then the final one with people like Mehika Kapoor, who's kind of become a celebrity PM because of Lenny's podcast and releasing slides, Figma slides. She has design engineering background, and now she's a PM. Do you feel like the skill sets are starting to converge? And if you're in one of the three disciplines, it could be useful to start to get more of the skills from the others?
I think it's going to be a natural process to that, right? If you look at this whole paradigm shift of product management and how you build product, I think it's going to be crucial to do that, right? If you're going to be a one-man band, if you want to call it, right? So as a product manager, you need to have that UX sense. Can you build proper user experiences? Can you do a product marketing for it? Can you potentially build a prototype from scratch? And how does that merge together? You're seeing engineers that are probably can't launch a product on their own tomorrow. And to your point, designers who are probably more capable down the road of building products, and if not build them from scratch. If you look at Figma Developer, where you can take the designs and probably convert them to code. So you're able to launch plans. I think what you're going to see, the convergence of the roles, where I don't know what that title is going to be, master of products, whatever it's going to be. Is it going to be product manager, product designer? I don't know what role and titles are going to be called down the road, but it's definitely going to be a symbiotic relationship where as a PM, you're doing more than the strategy down the road, where at least in the early days. So if you want to prove a point or a proof of concept, do you need to kind of tap on the shoulders of everyone else in the company and rally the troops to start a project? Or is this something that you can go on your own and build this? So I guess Mehika's, when she talked about Figma slides, so she had to rally folks, get engineers, etc. And I wonder, in a future world, where could she have done this alone, where she'd have built all of that, built the prototype, launched it, done A/B testing, and then showed up at an exec meeting. Hey, we've tried this out, and here's some results. Now give me the budget to actually go about this thing if you actually need to, right? So that's where I see it as exciting, where we're all going to be doing different things. And you already see some UX folks that are strong in product, or some product folks stronger in product marketing. And I think just going to be a natural order of things as we continue to build AI and improve it.
All right. So that is going super deep. 35 minutes deep on the craft of product management and AI. Now I want to switch to AI in products, closely related, but not exactly the same. How do you ensure that, your AI-driven products, because everybody's putting AI on their roadmap, right? You can't go to a board meeting and not talk about AI product strategy. How do you make sure that that's focused on genuine customer needs rather than just showcasing technological capabilities?
It's funny, I think, because you cannot say I cannot believe in AI, and you cannot say I'm not going to be building AI. There's a balance, and it goes back by this whole short-term and mid-term / long-term thinking about AI. In general, I do believe it's like we've done 35 minutes on this topic. It's obvious that I'm a big fan of the benefits for product and society. But I think what people forget sometimes, that the fundamentals of building product hasn't changed, right? Whether it's AI, blockchain in the past, or any other future Martian tech that's going to come in down the road, the key is to generally solve a problem that people actually have. We're not making up shit here, right? So the focus on understanding your users, their pain points, how your product can make their lives easier is still key to what we do, AI or not. Granted that your board, your VCs want to see AI, but if you don't need it, that's fine. Right? So that's kind of one way to look at it. I like what Steve Jobs used to say, right? You got to start with the customer experience and work backwards with technology. If that's AI, if that's just a database, whatever that is, focus on the problem itself. And there's definitely that excitement that a lot of companies and kind of products have today, right? So, and that excitement probably is pressure at the same time, whether it's from management, investors, to your point, the board, competitors, or just self-inflicting pains that you're enduring because you're seeing the competition launch it and there's hype and like, oh, what do you mean we don't have an AI strategy? We got to have an AI strategy, right? So there's all of that. We got to be honest with ourselves here that AI is not a one fits solution, or sorry, one size fits all solution, right? You might not need AI, as I mentioned. And if you do use AI in certain use cases, it might just feel like you're killing a fly with a bazooka. It's very effective, but probably not necessary. So like, how do you stay focused in this world? And hype is always going to be there, whether it's AI or something else. So kind of this advice probably applies to anything. I think you got to separate the hype from substance. And that means identifying the real problems. So if we ask ourselves as PMs, as founders, as owners of a company, what specific problems and kind of jobs to be done will AI solve for these users? Can it help find support answers better? Or can it improve and personalize the user experience more? Can they find certain pages faster and kind of onboard and upgrade faster because now you're able to tailor that experience? If you cannot pinpoint a clear answer, you're probably too early for AI, or you're kind of just pigeonholing yourself into an AI solution that you might not be ready. Now, that's kind of one way to look at it. If you look at it from a short midterm view. Now, if you tie it back to where the future for AI can be, and if we have a shift in paradigms, I think whatever I said might just not apply anymore, right? Because if you look at like, if this mindset is going to shifting to, oh, let's just spray and pray, and there's no real use cases, we got to figure out what actually works besides just chatbots. There's going to be a lot of that where let's just build things and see what sticks. Obviously, it doesn't have to be deviating completely from what you do as a business, but there's going to be like, let's just launch this and see how it helps the user, and then collect data and then see if you want to expand it or build it or make it as part of our offering. So there's going to be that change in mindset. And I think right now we might be talking about this, and I know I'm kind of contradicting myself because these are the thoughts in my head, right? I look at it from a short-term, mid-term solution, but I also know there's a change coming. So how do we adapt our behavior accordingly? So that's welcome to my mind. So when you look at user behavior in general, yes, today people might not care if you have AI or not, as long as you're solving their pain point. But just like the whole mobile app era, where people were figuring out, do we need a mobile app? What do we do with a mobile app? Are we cloud? Are we not cloud? I think AI at one point will follow the same path, where as a user behavior, you need AI, or you expect your products to have some AI behind the scenes, the same way now you expect any website or application to be mobile friendly or have a mobile application or some aspect of that, right? So once we're there, I think that's when you're going to get into experimentation territory more and more. And I think the other area when we look at it is, regardless of which approach we end up taking down the road, we got to reiterate, and we probably don't reiterate enough, that the marketing push of how AI exists in your product rather than the actual feature and how it solves the user is not going to get you market fit. So you got to focus on that as part of the mindset of how you're approaching these things. So this is kind of my way of at least how it filter out the hype on what we're doing, whether today or in the future.
Can you share potentially an example of when you guys considered potentially AI, but then said, okay, this isn't important enough problem for us to solve?
Yeah, I think, so there's two examples. When we start with Railz, I can get to Paramount after if you want. So at Railz, at one point, we were looking, especially when the whole AI hype started, right? Everyone was adding AI into their financial analysis, and we're going to give you predictive analytics or better financial planning. And at one point, we're okay, well, we have enough data on a business. We have accounting information, tax information, e-commerce data, payments data. There's probably something we can do in creating this virtual assistant, virtual admin guru, whatever you want to call it, to do things for the business that our customers were enterprise banks and FIs. where can they add this as a value add service to their SMBs? Because that's what we dealt with most of the time. And we can build a lot of those AI insights that will tell you how your business is doing. Oh, it looks like you're running out of money. I already took the advantage of applying a loan for you. I've balanced your books. I've filed your taxes. You're good to go. Oh, by the way, we've noticed your conversion has dropped. We've kind of shuffled things around based on your data. So that's kind of some things we were dreaming of. And then as we started looking into it, it's like, is anyone actually going to pay for it? Especially in the financial space, because people were scared. What's happening with this data? Where is it going? How are you getting that information in a world that's completely focused on privacy and security of financial data and transactions? Especially as a fintech, even makes it even worse. We ended up shelving that idea and focusing on what we actually brought immediate value to our customers instead. So that's kind of one way. Was as much as I was excited about getting into that, especially like what AI was new, especially Gen AI, I guess, in that side of things. Because Railz had AI from forecasting and things like that. But when we look at Gen AI and you can talk to it like, hey, how's my business doing? And things like that. It was very exciting when we did the prototype. But then when you look under the hood and you start kind of narrowing down your thoughts, we easily found out that's probably a bit of distraction for us as a business.
Was there a specific indicator within the process when you had the aha moment along the discovery path of, hey, we shouldn't pursue this anymore, even though we've built some prototypes?
Yeah, so I think there's two aspects to it. One is quality of the data we had, especially that accounting data is not necessarily immutable. So anyone can put whatever they want, and then you end up with garbage in, garbage out. So you end up with garbage Gen AI results, right? So that was kind of one problem that we didn't think we can solve. Neither did our customers believe we can solve. And the other area was we've seen, based on past history of how banks have rolled out some of our products then, that there was a hesitation of connecting your own information to get these results. And surprisingly, you'd think in B2C, folks would rely on more automation and I'll connect my plat or my data. But on the business side, people were holding back. They would rather fill a 20-page Excel sheet sometimes over giving you access to their data and do that. So there's still of that personal relationship in banking, especially on the SMB side, especially if you're looking at the older generation, probably millennials, not so much, but at least the personas and the ICPs on our end were more on the other area. So that's kind of where we end up at. The discovery results versus the reality of how our product is functioning with our customers was disconnected.
This episode is brought to you by Interpret. Interpret unifies all your customer interactions, from Gong calls to Zendesk tickets to Twitter threads and App Store reviews, making them available for comprehensive analysis. As we've profiled in the newsletter, it's the trusted choice of product organizations like Canva, Notion, and Descript. They rely on Interpret to drive forward their voice of customer programs. What makes Interpret special is its ability to, 1, build customer-specific AI models that provide more accurate categorization. 2, connect customer feedback directly to revenue impact so you can prioritize confidently. And 3, uncover insights with their Wisdom AI Copilot so you have an intuitive chat interface to access your data. So if you want a custom model built for your organization, get in touch with the team at interpret.com/product growth. That's ENTERPRET.com/product growth. All right. So I hope everybody learned from that you can create a fancy prototype, and I did this several times at Apollo too, but still go through the discovery work, even after you show that to the board. See if it's actually going to work, if you have data. Also, if you can provide an edge in your model. Is your data edge somehow going to be better than ChatGPT? There's no reason for you to just launch something like that, because are people going to actually pay for it, as you mentioned? So I think people are kind of rushing overall to put AI into their products. Do you agree? Are there any egregious examples you want to call out of people who kind of rush to put AI into their products?
I think the majority of companies out there have rushed to add AI to products, right? There's a lot of things where, look, I love some of these tools, right? I love Notion. I love Jira. I love, I mean, I'm no, not everyone loves Jira. I probably just said something controversial here, but product board. There's a lot of these folks that just added AI into it, and I personally don't use any of them just because I cannot rely on it yet. Especially like, for example, product board. They just hold AI product management, and they rode the wave really well. And probably it's converting for them. They doubled their pricing tiers, kind of put a lot of paywalls behind their functionality. Cool. Everything is insights. We're gonna give you the AI summaries. We're gonna give you sentiment analysis. Like, but this is how my PMs get to learn the customers. This is how they get to learn the business. If you're taking that away, why do I even need my folks? Then we're back to future PMs, which we're trying to fight as an industry in the first place.
Yeah, that's what I find is like I've been advising a couple companies who have released AI features and seen their metrics tank. And I think we've kind of talked about how if there was a core job to be done, you have to go let users do that. People are changing their homepage. They're changing their number one flows to put AI at the front. And what we've had to go do in some cases and has been very effective for the metrics is just make the AI optional. Like let people go do the job to be done. But if they are that below average, especially maybe with the tool or just generally in skill, then they will want to use the AI. But if they're craftspeople, if they've been using the tool a lot, it feels like often they won't elect to. And so it seems like some of the design patterns that product leaders were using when they rushed to ship out these AI features were wrong.
Yeah, and the thing is, some products require a nuance of understanding what you're doing, right? If you look just beyond basic operational tools in SaaS, right? If you look at, I don't know, shipping products, transportation products, whatever that is, you probably have an end user behind it all who might not be as tech savvy. So I cannot imagine, I don't know, a truck driver who's dealing with a TPS system to go and kind of deal. And this is not a shot at truck drivers. There's probably a lot of tech savvy truck drivers out there, but I just cannot imagine they're going to go in and do prompts and talk to the agent. I want this and I want that. It's like, I just want to click and get my order or know what's my next delivery or whatever that process is. I'm not saying there's no benefit, but when you make it at the forefront of all of that, it becomes more of a point of friction that, to your point, you see conversion tank and more drop-offs. Give people the optionality. If folks want to use it, yes, but don't make it the centerpiece of your product. At least for now.
You're preaching to the choir there. That's what I keep preaching to. And if you guys want to learn more, there's plenty on the newsletter about that. Let's move on to some of your hot takes about product management because they're pretty hot. The first one is you've stated that future PMs might not be a bad thing. And there's a lot of Marty Kagan devotees and Melissa Perry devotees who are throwing up their pitchforks that have been spending the last 15, 20 years trying to get rid of feature factory PMs and feature PMs. Can you elaborate on this?
You're planning to get me in trouble here. Okay. So I am a big fan of Marty Kagan, and I do believe he's kind of preaching the choir. I'm aligned with what his thoughts are, right? I do think since the whole Transform book and the podcast, and especially like after the Lenny podcast, I think not his fault, obviously, and there's nothing wrong with those ideas. I think the internet usually tends to blow out on these conversations, and you end up having kind of the internet trolls where, feature PMs suck, they're not real PMs, they're shit, and the whole drama around it, not forgetting that there's actually a human being at the end of it that might have not be enjoying feature PMing. I think Ben Erst kind of talked about it, like in defense of kind of feature PMs. Not everyone gets the experience of doing that in the first place. So, and then what throws fuel on the fire is that there's probably a lot of magazine managers and founders out there who are just going to read this book or listen to this podcast and just assume that this is how things need to be done and forgetting how it applies to their company or across the board. So I don't think anyone can argue that a feature factory kind of product team is a healthy or the way to build a business. It's not. I think Pendo had a statistic last year that 80% of features are probably rarely used, even more on an enterprise level. But we got to be realistic here at the same time and admit that feature PMs are in a way byproduct of the tech industry in general. You and I talked about it. earlier from an AI perspective. Your board, your VCs are expecting AI, right? A while back, you cannot go in and say, oh, we're solving this outcome and we're going to resolve these issues for our customers. Instead, oh, we're launching this feature to compete with X and we're doing this to do Y. And especially in startups where you're running you're in war zone or wartime mode all the time, right? You probably have 3 to 6 months runway, and to go into your board and say, oh, we're just doing discoveries and we're figuring out what's the best outcome when you have 3 months of cash to burn or make it as a business, where you actually have some features that will get you there. That's one angle. Then we forget that sometimes in a lot of companies, and maybe not so much enterprise, mature companies, more startups, mid-market areas, where the founders and the CEOs own the vision, if not fully, at least to a certain extent. So they have a good idea where the business is heading, what they want to do next quarter, how they want to get there. And that's what's been sold to board members, investors. That's how they've done their rounds. So you end up mostly having a top-down approach for that work. And especially in this market, if you want to keep your job, you got to play ball sometimes, where you want to get that credibility going and build some features to kind of get by. And to a certain point, I tell founders, you probably don't need a VP of product if you're in that early stage. You just need a glorified senior PM on that front. But if we kind of go back to this environment that I'm talking about, is this top-down approach and forces you to be in that mindset. You kind of earn those brownie points to show that you're valuable to the business. Because at the end of the day, that's how folks are being measured, right? It's just, are you launching a feature and people are celebrating it? Your sales team sells features to customers. Your marketing are putting features on their website. Your investors are asking about it. Your competition is doing feature party. Your website in general has product and solutions that are at the end of the day talking about features. You're not talking about outcomes. So I'm not necessarily advocating for it as much as that this is the reality of the industries, and we cannot take what was said in one book, which I think everyone should aspire to get there. And I think people forget that it's not really the reality behind the scenes in those tech companies that are talking about outcome PMs. If you look under there's probably some feature PMing happening behind the scenes or struggles to like every other company. I think that's kind of why talk about, or my thought is like, are they really a bad thing after all, right? So yes, do you want to transition folks to be outcome focused? Absolutely, because that's what's going to help to focus on the business, how you grow it, what happened before, are you measuring the right thing? And that's probably the main differentiator, honestly. Like if you look at an outcome-driven PM and a feature-driven PM, there's two things that are missing that an outcome PM does, which is kind of, I call them pre-mortems, post-mortems, or pre-launch, post-launch activities. You're thinking about the market and is your feature actually valuable to the customer? But there's a big, maybe 80% chunk of the work that overlaps with the feature PM. So to go in and dismiss that they're not real PMs, or they don't have a good job, or we should let them go, they're project managers, probably not a fair statement in my opinion. Instead, I'd rather just upscale those folks, kind of start thinking about that and giving them the opportunity to strengthen that muscle of strategy, which is kind of what's missing for a feature PM sometimes. So that's what I'm not saying these folks are wrong. I advocate for that. I'm a big fan. I think at Paramount, we operate under that model, right? I would say we are operating under an outcome based product management. We tie to goals. We have strategy pillars for the year. Every quarter we have OKRs and kind of goals that we set, things we're trying to solve, and then there's initiatives that end up being features at the end of the day. Are there exceptions to the rule? Absolutely. There's in fintech and payments specifically, there's things that are always coming your way, whether regulatory change or compliance or defending your position in the market, that the team's just going to do a quick discovery. It's going to keep top down. We got to do this to stay alive as a business, or especially if it's regulatory and compliance related. You're not going to go say, okay, what's the output of this and how can I measure it? Like, you're just going to have to build this feature because you have to. So that's where I'm coming from when I say that.
Yeah, I think that there was a CNBC study in March, and it looked at something like 100 plus titles, and it looked at how many people want to quit their jobs. And crazily enough, product management was the highest. We're not talking about janitors. We're not talking about cashiers, people who, are underpaid and have to deal with horrible working conditions. We're talking about people who are generally overpaid, have decent working conditions, wanting to quit. So I think what I'm hearing from you is we need to reset the expectation for those folks that what you're doing isn't bad and it's not invaluable. It might be a result of the circumstances of your situation.
Absolutely. I mean, there's folks who haven't seen the other side, what it is to be an outcome driven. So their experience, like, oh, this is what product is. I mean, I don't think there's a proper definition for product manager is. Like, it varies from one company to the other. I have not seen like this is the definition, unless we're trying to make it so. And I feel like it just evolves from one company to the other. So at the end of the day, it's like what works for your company works for your company. If your customers are happy, you're growing, your product is successful, you have the product market fit, you're getting that 2x, 3x, 10x growth over time. Cool, that works for you. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into a certain framework or what the internet is saying or how you should be doing product. Now, are you going to be obsolete on those skills if you stay in that? Probably to a certain extent. You might be working well here, but if you're trying to expand your career and go somewhere else, what you do as a product manager might not work in another area that is operating under an outcome kind of based mindset. And I think that's where all comes on you as a PM. If your organization is not giving you that opportunity, go seek mentorship, talk to folks, listen to podcasts to understand it. But in there, if you haven't really practiced it and implemented it in your day-to-day, it's really hard to resonate. You and I can talk about everything AI we can do, but unless we've actually done it, it can be really hard to relate to it and say, oh, this is my lessons learned from this and how we should be doing it.
Makes sense. So switching gears to another hot take, which is just about as hot, because here again, we have some people on the other end of the spectrum who are happily employed and feeling threatened. You mentioned that the product owner role is nonsensical in this day and age. What's your reasoning behind this?
You're really trying to get me canceled in the product community. I think this product, again, I do understand that words have kind of meaning and power behind them. So you got to be careful what you say. And funny thing, I just launched published a post about product owners as a redundant role this morning on my newsletter. I think it comes to how was the PO role born? It kind of was born out of Scrum. Kind of the whole idea was a role that represents customer's voice, prioritize the backlog, and middleman between engineering and the business, et cetera, and making sure that we're working on the right stuff. That was kind of the original definition. Now, the problem is that in a lot of companies, the role of PO varied. And from anywhere from backlog prioritization to maybe glorified note takers, if you want to call them, for the engineering team. And this is, I mean, if people are happy doing it, that's fine, right? It's, again, this is my perspective. If you're a product owner, you're happy with what you're doing, I'm an idiot, discard everything that I just said, right? But I think I just cannot recall where this shift happened in the industry where we shifted from a PO being a role, and probably as companies started scaling, they noticed that, the PM responsibilities have become too general, too broad. Hey, it's a good idea. Let's just split the role and kind of have a PM and a PO as job titles with that separation. My problem with that is it's just adding another layer of self-inflicted communication and process pains and breakdowns when the responsibilities of a product owner or the role and the tasks of a PO, at least in the Scrum perspective, can be shared by a capable product manager and an engineering manager who can run things perfectly fine. If you're introducing a PO to this, now you're just diluting the knowledge. Now you have a bunch of multiple folks who know a bit of everything versus specialized folks who know everything on how to drive this process. So it kind of goes back to the trio. It's product manager, engineer, designer. There was no product owner in the middle of this. And this is not going to have a snobby way. It's like, POs suck. It's not, right? It's just, in a lot of businesses, a PO is probably needed. And if you're driving value, whatever your PO role, whatever your title, if you're kind of Scrum Master, Jedi, user story, Lord, whatever that is, if you're driving value for your business, who cares, right? Forget about what I'm saying. If someone finds value in what you're doing in the business, that's perfect. Keep rolling with that. But I think it's just more of when we focus on the delivery side of things and introducing those additional individuals. Because there's a difference between the role and having an individual filling a title, because a PO role can be easily split between the PM and engineering manager from my perspective. So that's when I say it's a nonsensical role. It just does not make sense. And I want to say, like, I probably have some PMs in the past who are operating more as a PO, but we ended up kind of upskilling them to operate at a PM level and kind of stepping away from the day-to-day user story management and kind of the solutioning to actually thinking big picture, seeing the forest among the trees, and all of that jazz. And I probably have that today. It's just a traditional kind of growth in your journey, which I don't think you need to start as a product owner and then you grow into a product. Just have a product manager. Cool. If too junior, give them an APM role. Titles aside, just focus them on being focused on the business and the strategy instead of just being in the weeds of delivery. And I think that's kind of my main issue.
Yeah, I think that the place where product owners seem to have plugged in the most is that like traditional project management. It's making sure the sprints are happening, the sprint rituals are happening, making sure everything is prepared, making sure all those backlog groomings and daily stand-ups in those sessions happen. So what I'm hearing is the engineering manager can take most of that, and what the engineering manager can't take, the product manager can take. And so that's why there shouldn't be a full-time person on it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I was listening to your Jason's episode with you at how you might have some engineers who are just going to plug in their headphones and code away, right? That might work, but it won't work if you want to scale a team or if everyone is like that, like to his point, right? And I think if you want your engineering managers to be involved in the solution, you want them to be involved in the planning. They're the ones who are on the hook at the end of the day. They're the ones coding. So if they have no say on what's being prioritized and you don't want to just be dumping features in them, you want to see the engineering side of the roadmap. I don't believe there's a tech roadmap, product roadmap. There's one roadmap, right? Which might have tech that the engineering manager and the engineering team is going to bring into the table. Like, hey, we got to do this. And it's your job as a PM to explain to the business why you're doing this tech that in the first place. So that's where I see like this whole kind of marriage between the PM and the EM on that front. I just don't see a PO in the picture. And from experience, the more when I introduced the PO, I had that disconnect because now you have the PM just focus on strategy, go to market, and the PO running delivery. And sometimes there's a disconnect. This is not my job. And there's a passing of the hot potato between those three versus really level setting on the ownership of things.
So a slightly adjacent role to the PO that even the world's best product companies, the ones that are glamorized and inspired like Google and Meta, they still hire technical program managers for their biggest product teams. What do you think about that role?
I haven't experienced a technical program manager myself. I mean, we have a thing at Paramount, but the job description is a bit better. I think where it comes in handy for cross-functional and cross kind of org projects, the TPMs here can come in handy where you're not just focused on what you're building as a product, because at one point it becomes too much if you're focusing on all the, especially at the bigger company, right? Like you have to worry about operations, finance, how this gonna do change management downstream, and how is it gonna change things for the users? I think a TPM in this case can definitely help in being a bridge across those different organizations, at least, or parts of the organizations. But I don't think they're making day-to-day decisions on what's being delivered, what are we actually building, when, at least from what I've seen with other folks, they weren't on the critical path of things as much as the champion between different cross-functional teams.
Makes sense. So shifting to another hot take, roadmaps. People love debating about roadmaps. Some love now, next, later. Some still defend the Gantt chart. Some are all about problems and problem solution trees. And that's exactly what you need to do. If you're not using an opportunity solution tree, you are just wrong. You've talked a little bit about the featureless product roadmap. Can you tell us more? It's
funny that as product managers, it's just product folks, we love to complicate things when our job is to build simple things. I don't know why. Is this part of the job description? I don't know. I think the first time I mentioned featureless product roadmap to our board and our CEO, the look I got in my face is like, are you guys sure you hired the right person? But I think, let's maybe take a step back. What is a feature-based roadmap to begin with, right? So, or what are the problems with feature-based roadmap? If you look at just like feature-based roadmap, it's Now we're going to build feature A. Next, we're building feature B. I'm a fan of now, next, later, by the way. So that's how I like to communicate my roadmaps as well. As you get to the delivery, you probably want to have a bit more granularity about timelines. But a feature-based roadmap, you're really communicating, I'm launching feature A, feature B, feature C, and here's the timeline. The problem with that is you're converging on features and defining features early on your product roadmap, which creates a risk of building the wrong thing for the wrong ICP. If the conversation is starting, I'm building dark mode, and what are the different things of dark mode, or I'm building this thing, the objections are going to start focusing on what are we building, how are we building it versus something else, right? And as you get into that mindset, puts you in the world of feature PMs, or the whole output versus outcome mindset. And that lets you lose track of the real value of what you're actually doing. And that quickly escalates to being a feature factory team, and quickly you lose sight of your vision. But at the same time, that's everything execs sell, right? They want to sell to the board, to the VCs, your marketing team, your sales team is building entire customer pipeline based on the features you have. So how the hell do you move away from that, and why? I think what I like to go with is theme-based roadmap, or maybe outcome-based roadmap. And here's why, right? So one, it's easier to get stakeholder alignment over problems and goals versus features. If you go into your exec team and your board is like, hey, we've noticed a 30% abandonment rate in our shopping cart. We plan to drop that by 20%, right? I think you'll probably get buy-in on solving that problem. No one cares probably how you get to solve it, as long as you drop that abandonment rate by 20, 50%, whatever you've put as a target. So it's easier to kind of align on that. And obviously there's features that are needed to fulfill this goal. And that's kind of where you end up doing after. But at least to start with, you're aligning on a theme, on an objective that the business kind of goes with. And then as you continue building that, you're staying strategically on track. Mostly because you're shifting your mindset now towards the outcome, not just the output. Oh, did I launch feature A on time? Did I launch feature B on time? And everything you're doing right now, you're measuring it compared to, if we go back to our example of dropping the abandonment rate, everything you're doing now is you're going to be thinking, how does this help us drop this rate? Or you're tying it against those goals as you go along. And then kind of shift your mindset to focus on those North Star metrics, whatever those are, to look at it. It kind of shifts your mindset from how long does it take us and how is this going to look to, do we actually care about building this? How is this really going to help us get to that goal? And do we actually care in the first place? Is this really going to move the needle? So these are the different mindsets you'll have as a PM when you can adopt that roadmap. I'm not saying you don't have features. You definitely have features. That's what's actually being built at a granular level downstream. But at least at a high level, you're aligning everyone on those initiatives. And that's how I kind of like to build my roadmaps. And it's easier to go in to, I run these value poker sessions where we bring in our execs and kind of we bring in all the initiatives or the problems that we're trying to solve, and you can rate the value to the business, this problem, how big it is to the business, what's the value if we solve it. And we're really not getting the details of much what's being solved as much. Here's the problem and here's some ideas of how we want to solve it. So you're able to kind of level set early on. And then now next we go in, okay, we're going to fix this problem in the next 2 quarters. And what can we do? What are the 80-20 features that will allow us to get there? So that's kind of where I stand on that from that perspective. And that's how I like to communicate. Now, do I have to communicate features every now and then? Absolutely, because some folks want to know what's actually coming downstream, because people are not going to sell outcome on their website and their sales deck as much as like, hey, we have these coming. So it's not as much as like how you communicate it all the time versus how you think about it and you plan it internally as a product team.
So it almost sounds like it's more about when features come into the picture, which is the key here. So can you get really granular with us? Like, what is the best case scenario? You mentioned you guys have quarterly OKRs, for instance. Is that at that point, are you lining up your initiatives for your actual features, or do the features come even later?
Yeah. So we start usually with an annual planning, whether Paramount, Railz, pretty much every company, at least the last 3 companies I worked at. We start with our annual strategy, where here's where we think the market is heading, and here's what we want to do this year. There's pillars that come out of it, And then depending on how the execs kind of want to plan it, and certain companies are also part of the exec team, Paramount, I'm just part of the leadership team. So you kind of align on here's the strategy and here's the priorities we really think are important for us as a business this quarter. And there's a bit of a top-down, bottom-up approach because a certain goal or objective or OKR at a company level cannot just be addressed by product, right? It might need operations, might need engineering, might need finance, legal, etc. Especially when you look at compliance projects, for example. So that's one area where we go in, here's a strategy, and here's kind of the goals we want to achieve this quarters. And then my PMs, we follow domain-driven design, for example, at Paramount. So each domain goes in, or each pod in previous companies would go in and say, okay, here's my candidate list of how we think we can achieve these goals or these problems. And this is what we think will do better if we solve this versus that. So there's some metric. So it's the problem statement, how we solve it. So if we go back to our example of shopping cart, it's like, okay, well, we've seen an abandonment of 30% drop off. Our goal as a business, we really need to drop that to 5% tops. So this is where you kind of give that problem statement to your team. And now the backend folks might figure out, it's like, oh, you know what? There's issues with our APIs, our integrations are not working. Here's the top 5 things we think we can hit this quarter. And here's how it will help us or what will help with. And then you have more the growth folks where, oh, we can probably do follow-ups and we're missing some campaigns to nurture after drop-off, which will allow them to kind of come back and fulfill this order after. So let's just say these are the examples that come in. And then we take that and go present it to our leadership team and exec team. Like, okay, look, we've heard these are the goals top down. And here's our view as product, what we think we can do. And that gets voted, okay, we think based on these priorities and what our engineering team can actually deliver this quarter, we commit, we're going to solve problem A with probably starting with feature A, feature B. And they might have phases, right? You might start, you know what, we're going to do phase 1 of revamping the shopping experience, right? And there's probably going to be a target state and a few kind of interim states to get there. And that's what gets prioritized for the quarter. And we kind of deliver on that and we measure conversion or whatever that goal, how it's trending. And then next quarter, we repeat that. Did we actually solve the problem? It's you got to do a retro on it. Do we still need to solve it? And if we think, usually it takes 90 days plus to kind of start seeing those results in the first place. So you got to do your postmortems then. But if we still think it's a problem, then we can reiterate over it to kind of continue. I hope that paints a better picture.
That really helps. And then the final detail of how you actually go about doing this that I'm interested in is the episode before yours releases will be with Ravi Mehta. And one of his sort of strongest, hottest claims was your product strategy documents need wireframes to be effective. In this setup that you just explained, I'm not sure there will actually be wireframes because it sounds more like phases of problems to solve. What is your take on that?
I don't think necessarily you don't need wireframes. I love to tell our team, go and design the target state, think about the target state, right? Go think about that Ferrari. But can you give me a Corolla for today to solve the problem with it? And how do we get to a Ferrari, right? And Corollas are reliable. So I think that's what we do. I mean, we're working on something today at Paramount where we have a target state designed for revamping our whole experience. And it's probably going to take us 2-3 quarters to get there, hopefully less. But we've done here's what phase 1 looks like, and here's what phase 2 is. And we think phase 1 and phase 2 will probably solve the problems, by the way. Phase 3 is more like a stretch goal and will become a nice to have if our goals actually end up being met on that front. So now you're not just limited to this phase only, because you want to give that creative freedom to your team. You cannot just pigeonhole it as oh, just solve it this way, because then it's no longer fun. The whole part of being a product manager or product designer, or just being part of a product team, is that creativity and solving things in a novel way and taking a stab at things, running quick prototypes around it. And afterwards we align, okay, this is good for phase 1 and we think we can live with it, and we present it and gets the buy-in on it. So I absolutely think you probably need that prototype because it helps with buy-in even more versus just putting a strategy doc. And because we thought we're going to build this today and you deliver phase 1, for a lot of execs, oh, this is done, this problem is solved, versus no, this is where we're going to be, but this is how we're going to solve it over the next 2 quarters. So when you bring it up next quarter, it's hey, what the hell? I thought you guys did this. So it kind of level sets the expectation early on.
I love that. So that nuance and that texture, I think, really helps everybody understand. Featureless product roadmap doesn't mean no wireframes. It doesn't mean that you're not talking about what the ideal vision quarters down the line might look like. It's more about striking that fine balance that we all want to strike of directing the team, but also giving them creativity and allowing them to discover along the way. So I want to shift to kind of your final hot topic, which is frameworks. I know you're not much of a fan of frameworks, but you have, mentioned some of them, like jobs to be done, continuous discovery already, the concept of being empowered. So kind of what's your overall take on all these PM frameworks out there, and how should PMs be using or not using frameworks?
Oh yeah, I think you just painted me that I'm completely anti a lot of things out there. And I'm glad that we're highlighting and explaining myself on them. I think maybe just the point itself might sound provocative, but as we explain it, might not sound as much. So I think if we look at just frameworks, I'm not dismissing their value. I think they offer great value, guidance, and structure. Right? I've learned some frameworks from my mentors, from my previous managers, from newsletters. There's frameworks that I still haven't got the chance to try, that I hear about on newsletters, etc. The problem that I find with frameworks, and as the internet is big and as people are just generating content out there with AI, there's a lot of ideas and thought leaders, and I'm probably guilty myself about talking about how I run my product and how I do things. Like just this conversation, I might just be influencing someone to do something the wrong way, or they feel this is the right way to do it. It's not. Everything I'm sharing is based from my perspective, from my own experiences. So might not necessarily work for you if you're reading or listening to what I say. Now, a lot of those folks who are sharing frameworks, or when people are usually talking about a framework, it originally originated from how they operated as a business, their need as a business, or how they require to build their product, not necessarily the only way to do things. Now, I think you and I, when you're at a VP level or kind of senior level, like you understand that things change and you got to adapt things. But there's still a lot of entrance to the product sector, and PMs, as junior PMs, folks transitioning from PO to PMs, they go and read all of this stuff online and they assume that this is the only way to do things. This is how you do your continuous discovery. This is how you do prototyping. This is how you do jobs to be done kind of ideation and blah, 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 etc. I think that's what I'm trying to tell folks, like just don't follow it blindly. It's not a one size fits all. Like at a startup stage when you're still trying to figure out what works, no framework is going to work. I've never followed any framework when I was building my initial products. Like at Coral, I didn't follow frameworks. All I did was went and talked to customers, went and talked to small businesses. That's all I did, and figured out I wasn't doing kind of opportunity mapping. I wasn't doing kind of jobs to be done right. It's like, oh, what are the different jobs they're going to be doing? And let me do some journey mapping. I didn't do any of that, right? I just went, talked to customers. Okay, cool. I think this is what I'm going to prototype with. I'm just going to try it out and see what sticks and iterate. And sometimes I ended up dumping it completely in the garbage and started all over. Until you've reached a certain level of maturity as a business, that's where framework starts being adaptive to what you need as a business. Again, like over-reliance on your framework can lead you to that checkbox mentality very quickly. And again, every PM is different. Personalities are different. Some folks love to challenge the status quo. I call them the shit disturbers. And they'll look at a framework and say, oh, cool, I'll take this from that and I'll use this way. I might create my own Frankenstein of a framework, but hey, it works for how I want to run as a business, how I want to run my product. That's what I've done. That's how some of my PMs do. And that's what I kind of loved when I saw your article about how PRDs should be. It's more like a checklist, not a template that you should fill. I mean, I still have templates for my team, but I tell them, use it as guidance. If you have your own template, your own way, all I care about is that you're covering these points in your PRD. Doesn't matter if you have bullet points, images, whatever you want to do, just have that checklist. But I think that's kind of the pitfalls of framework, especially when you're the junior mid-level experience. You're just assuming it's like the Bible. It's like scripted and that's what we have to do. And if you're not doing it this way, you're not PMing. And the internet is very judgy about these things. That this is the only way to do product. I think the best example that I could follow when I think Spotify, when they rolled out the whole pod framework and how you can hold release trains. everyone was jumping on that wagon. Pods is the shit. Pod is the way to go. And then Spotify ended up abandoning pods like a year or two later because it just was not efficient or effective for them as they scaled as a business. I mean, our Rails, we adopted pods. I was like, hey guys, by the way, Spotify adopted pods 2 years ago. I mean, sure, it ended up working for us as a business, although kind of was obsolete for Spotify probably. But I think that's kind of my challenge when I talk about frameworks, that use them as guidance, as a logical way of approaching things. Just that does not necessarily mean it's going to always work for you.
That's the takeaway that I would triple emphasize for everybody. Like anyone who's been in the game, like Sam and I, we've rolled out frameworks to companies. We've been excited. And then 3 years later, we find out that our source was just totally wrong or they changed. And so it doesn't matter how excited you are about maybe even a framework worked at your last job, it might not work at this job. A framework is just a tool. It's just a starting point, I think. So great. I love how you put that with the Spotify example, which people should pay attention to. And there was also an investigative report done when Spotify published those blogs. And they found that a lot of teams in Spotify weren't even practicing the pod model when Spotify said they were. So it was never true from the start, and they let everybody know eventually.
I think there was like the best example that I had was a startup that I was mentoring. They were trying to roll out like dual track agile discovery and building at the same time. But then their design team was so understaffed and they were like 7-8 weeks behind delivery. Like it is like, you don't have dual track. You have more like a waterfall at this point, and like you gotta fix that problem before you just like adopt dual track just for the sake of adopting dual track. So I'm kind of allergic sometimes to some leaders who come in. It's like, this is what I've done in my last org, and we're just gonna bring in all my templates. And I mean, I'm guilty. I've done it in my early days of leadership because I thought that works, and I quickly had a reality check after, like, oh shit, that doesn't work here, and I'm gonna have shit tons of resistance to change on this one. I probably need to adapt my thinking on this.
Yeah, and it creates a lot of burden on the team too to just keep changing those processes when probably what matters most is, are you guys choosing the right problems to solve? Are you guys moving the metrics? So
Exactly. So are you moving? Is the graph going up and right? So that's what matters.
So a lot of people, they want to become product managers, and you have suggested that people shouldn't become them. Why is that?
Are we going to say anything nice today? Or
We're going through all your hot takes. We got to clarify.
All right. I think it's not necessary to discourage everyone from pursuing product management. It's just more to acknowledge that it's not a fit for everyone. And again, this is not like it's a bougie, poshy club. You gotta have a blood oath to go in. It's not that. Right? It's just this, I don't know, the different PMs that I've mentored or managed throughout my career, the main differentiators between a good PM and a bad PM was like okay-ish PM, and the folks that would hire in a heartbeat tomorrow and any other job were folks that had something unique in their personality and kind of how they approach things. And that requires those unique combination of skills, which includes strategic thinking, strong empathy, problem-solving mindset, and ability to adapt, which are not easy to teach. Like there's a lot of folks who do not do well with change, and they're just like stuck to their process and cannot adapt, especially if now you add AI and how are we going to change the way we work. And no, this is how I know things work. Here's my box, and I'm not going to operate behind that. And usually you don't end up succeeding within that framework. And then so to that point, like not everyone has the ability to possess or is inclined sometimes to develop those skills. I mean, I've had a PM in the past where didn't see the value of our one-on-ones or didn't see the value of customer discoveries. And we're just going to go about things like, well, shit doesn't work like that. And you got to learn to adapt and learn. And I'm probably going to learn from my team, but you also got to learn from the companies you're working at, from the folks mentoring you. That's where like aptitude matters, right? So in my hiring in general, I don't care if you know the business, or I mean, in certain cases I do, like in payments, if you don't know what payment rails are. But if you don't know payment experience, that's fine. I'll go hire someone who's new to payment because it's fresh set of eyes, right? So there's the balance. But I don't care about how much you know about a business, about an industry, as much as do you have the aptitude to learn about the business or industry. As long as you have those core skills, you are a critical thinker. You challenge the status quo. If I give you metrics, you're gonna not just look at the dashboard. Like, okay, cool. If it's green, if it's red, if you're not questioning why is it up 2%, like, do you have that curiosity? It's like, okay, cool, it's up 2%, it's not much, but do you care to understand why it's up 2%? Or it's like, why is it down 1% when it hasn't been down at all more than 1%? So are these kind of lagging or leading indicators that you need to be looking at? So I think that mindset, not everyone possesses, at least from my experience. I have not seen everyone has it, and it was not something I was able to coach. Maybe it was me. I don't know, right? But at least I haven't seen ability for folks who did not have it to learn it. And they're struggling in other roles right now that they're in today, right? So I think that's why one of the things where I can tell folks, maybe you shouldn't be a PM if I know how they think. And I think there's this whole perception of what a PM is, right? There's probably a lot of memes out there, and goes back to articles and what people used to think about is like, oh, we're the mini CEO and I'm going to control what I build. Spoiler alert, you don't control anything. Pretty much most of that, like even those bets and strategies that we're talking about, most of the time those bets are placed by someone else. Sure, we'll probably have a stronger voice sometimes in how we shape those bets and what bets to focus on, but it might not be the case for a lot of product teams and PMs in this case. So that's why I kind of tell folks to, if you want to get into PM, you probably want to know what's coming. It's a demanding job at the end of the day. And this is not to scare you. It isn't. There's a lot of things going on. You're thinking about your customers, stakeholders. Sometimes if people are happy, then you're okay. But when people are not happy, you're blamed for it after all because you're on the hook for something. And so that's kind of where I discourage, or can I say, not everyone's probably built to be. Yeah.
So
and I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail for this.
No, I don't think so. I've said similar things in the past. I think that there's, two or three things that you touched on that I just want to put names on and then see if you agree. So one is agency, which you talked about, like the ownership mentality of questioning the metrics, thinking like an owner. The second is empathy and teamwork, which is like being able to take the blame, being able to go get permissions from legal and privacy and everybody else. And then the third, which I think you touched on a little bit earlier, is that ability to work really hard too, right? You can't, this is not one of those careers that you're just going to be kind of chilling. You're going to have some days where you can be calm. It's just always chaotic and crazy. Are those fair as like, for an aspiring PM, you need to make sure you check off those three. Are there any other big ones?
I think that, and I think there's probably some, which kind of touches upon on it's demanding, it's more the mental toll that takes on you as a PM. There's a lot of mental stress that comes with product management. Like sometimes you have to work those extra hours, and problem solving will probably be valued more than problem prevention in your business, or short-term execution will be valued more than long-term planning. So you'll see someone launching more features, being more valued in the business versus you're actually solving outcomes that might take 6-9 months to realize as a business. So that can come demoralizing. So there's a bit of I joke with my PMs, if you're going to be getting a PM job, get a subscription for the, basically, someone to talk to, a social worker, any health worker you want to work with, because it helps, All
right. BetterHelp. I think you sponsor like every single podcast except for the PM ones. So reach out to me. So if you've passed all these hurdles that we've put up for you, we've said, you have these features, but probably also you see the PM compensation and you want that. You actually mentor a lot of folks with that through the Toronto Product Management Association and FinTech Cadence. So what is the most common advice you find yourself giving aspiring product managers?
Well, one of the advice, we'll see if it keeps coming after this podcast, is I get approached by a lot of POs trying to transition to PM. And like, how can they move beyond backlog and start building the strategic muscles? And the funny thing, a lot of the POs I've worked with reported to engineering, not product. So it ends up being a difficult dance to have and kind of mentor them because, how can they now put themselves out there to transition to a product manager when they're reporting to a completely different side of the organization? And this is where you see folks who are more hustlers. They want to try to be involved and they push themselves into those product meetings and things like that. And those are the folks that are able to kind of make the jump. And then folks like, I'm complaining. Nothing's happening. I've learned all of this, but you create your opportunity, you control your career, and you seek that internally or externally. And I think that's most of the advice I end up working with. Sometimes we'll will push them to see how they can get that opportunity. And when they're given that opportunity, I work with them on revising approach and what's expected to kind of make it there. Or if they're applying for a role internally for a product manager, I kind of do kind of stress testing on their interview. So that's kind of one area I work with them. The other area within fintech cadence or startups in general is two things. How do you build a roadmap as a startup, and do you need a roadmap? And my answer is like, you definitely don't. Vision and conviction is your guiding principle in startup. You're always trying to build the biggest bang for your buck. Roadmaps, worry about it when you have PMF. So that's kind of been a broken kind of record at this point for a lot of those startup founders. And the other area is hiring your first product leaders. So a lot of companies and founders, they'll do their Series A and it's like, oh, well, I'm ready to hire my product leader. I want to hire my head of product or my VP of product. When should I do that? How can I do that? What's there to do? My advice for those usually are like, what are you willing to give up, right? So there's two types of product leaders you would usually hire on that front, at least what I advise. Is, do you want them to own the vision, or do you want them to own the delivery of that vision, right? Because there are two different mindsets, two different folks, and it's very hard to find someone who's really good at both. You probably know someone who does both, but they probably excel in one area versus the other, right? So what do you need and what are you willing to give? In a lot of phases of the Series A, Series B, and below, usually the founders will continue to earn the vision on that front. So they're more looking for someone, oh, I'm going to build my product operating model. I want my product processes. In that case, my advice, just go build a fractional, hire a fractional product leader. You probably don't need a full-time product manager. All you're thinking about is, I need to build an operating model. I need to coach my product managers. What are the processes? How can I scale my product process? How do I do discoveries? Things like that. You probably don't need a full-time product leader. It's not the best case use of their time or the best value for your money on that front, especially if it's not a full-time thing. So these are kind of the areas I end up talking to a lot of founders and POs, PMs about.
All right. So if you can remember back to 45 minutes ago, we spent 45 minutes talking about AI. And we talked about AI changes in PM, but what's sort of a widely accepted non-AI PM practice today that you believe will be obsolete in 5 years?
Product owners. I'm just kidding. So I think it's more, not necessarily just one thing as much as the paradigm that we talked about, right? I think how we think about product today is going to be flipped completely in a few years. I might be wrong, but I think that's just how I see things in the startups I talk to, or my wife also works with a couple of like startups as a fractional AI leader and kind of building their AI strategy. Like what I hear from how their product teams are struggling with is like they're trying to bring in this full product mindset that we all know and we've been used to for years, and try to build AI product, which does not work. And I think that's what's going to be challenged and probably become obsolete, because at least until we figure out how AI is going to be integrated within our product, that's kind of what really comes to mind right now. But I still double down on the product owners. I think probably as AI evolves, the title product owner probably will not exist.
All right. Some product owners might be unfollowing you. Let's end on the lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm excited for this one.
All right. What's your favorite product or growth book?
So I'm not a books guy, but I'll give you a podcast. Which helped me a lot in my early parent days, which is Startup Dad by Adam Fishman. So I tune into every podcast episode and I'm a big fan.
It's awesome. He covers, how to deal with being a parent. So I like that as well.
And building companies. Like I find examples like, how the hell are they doing this? I'm struggling as is.
Nice. What's a newsletter you like reading?
You mean besides product growth? I think there's few. Lenny's, obviously the classic. Leah's Product Tea and Growth Unhinged usually are my top ones that I follow. On product growth, I'm not joking. It's just one growth that I follow as well.
You're too nice. What's a new product you started using and enjoy?
Monarch. So since Mint kind of shut down and no longer in the space, my wife and I adopted Monarch for our family budgeting, financial planning, goal setting. So I can share my referral code later if anyone wants it.
All right. What's your favorite interview question of PM candidates?
Evolved over time. I think the last version of it is, what's one area in your personal or work life you're trying to improve and why. So basically it gives me an idea if someone is full of shit and has some self-awareness or not.
All right. What's one product feature or product, since you're a pretty senior leader, that you're most proud of shipping?
I'm usually like proud of all the work my team and I have done. Maybe kind of answer a bit differently, not a product. I mean, I see Coral being my first company that I founded as my product or my baby. So I think that was kind of my proudest moment, mostly because, I mean, it wasn't a success story, but I think the great failure lessons that I had as a first-time founder and building 0 to 1 products shaped who I am today as a leader. And I think that's kind of, for me, is one of those proudest things that I launched, regardless of the results.
What is one of those particularly memorable failures and what did you learn?
Building something that requires a lot of regulatory approval, including riding the hype. I think when we were building Coral, we were building it in the whole ICO frenzy world, and we spent the whole security token offering twist on it, which ended up delaying things for us for a year, spending a lot on legal fees when we could have just maybe used those funds to start at a smaller scale. For context, Coral was a revenue sharing investment in startups and businesses, but we wanted to add a blockchain spin to it because first time founder, I got to ride the hype, etc. So we went to the whole blockchain world. We're going to tokenize our company and let folks participate in the investments on those businesses. Little did I know that you can't just like launch shit like that. You need regulatory approval, and it's such a closed environment. Derailed us for a year and a half, depleted our cash, and that probably cash could have been used to something better, including doing maybe $5,000 loans for e-commerce companies. I mean, that model ended up being successful because there's a company called Clearco that does something similar today. So at least I know we were on the right track. We were just not focused properly. But that was a lesson learned, and kind of, I call it baptism by fire.
Thanks for sharing that. Where can people find you online?
I'm pretty much active on LinkedIn, so Sam Kawsarani, and I have a weekly newsletter called the Product Trench on Substack, a combo of weekly roundups and original posts here and there, focused on product management, startups, and leadership. So that's where you can find me, or you can just contact at samkawsarani.com, and I'm happy to jump in on any meet and greet and talk about anything you need.
Cool. And how can listeners help you?
Feedback and different perspectives. Obviously, everything I shared today was based on my own perspective and my experiences. So agree or disagree with anything I said today or in my content, whether Substack or LinkedIn, like, comment, reshare, give me feedback, message me privately, tell me I'm wrong. It's validation to see if I'm on the right track with what I'm doing, but also just gives me a different perspective of what you're experiencing. And hey, one day I might actually write about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find out about the podcast. You can find all the past episodes or learn more about the show at product-growth.com. See you in the next episode.